Okay, everybody. Hi. Sorry, I'm late. That's me because I was working on my audio configuration here. Brian for breaking down security. It's our Friday. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us. And I have a friend today with me, Tanya. Tanya
Hi.
has been on the show a couple of times talking about application security. Very happy that she's here and very happy with her success. If you've heard of shehackpurple, shehackpurple.ca. She started that up with an idea to educate people on application security, but I'll let her explain that. Welcome, Tanya, to the show. Thank you, and glad you could take time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much for having me back, Brian. It's always a pleasure every time.
Fantastic. Awesome. So just for our regular stream members, I've disabled the chat along the bottom. You can ask your questions and I will send them along to Tanya. Also, any notifications or any kudos or any bits or anything you might send along on the Twitch stream, I've also turned that off so that way we can have a somewhat professional stream today. Depending on if my cat shows up or not, it'll go downhill real quick. But thank you for all your Twitch bits, cheers, and everything, and any questions you might have for Tanya. And we're also simulcasting on our YouTube. Thank you for Mohammed. Thank you. And so, Tanya, for those people who may not be savvy to who you are, tell them a little bit about yourself, how you got to be where you're at, shehackpurple and Semgrep, and your passion for AppSec things.
That is a lot. So, so I was a software developer who came over to the dark side. Basically, I had a friend and he was a pen tester. And he was in a band and I was in a band. So I played music for a really long time. And so we became friends. And after about a year of friendship, he said, "You should be a pen tester, man. You'd be so good, man." He used the word man a lot. And
Nice.
I kept saying to him, like, I don't know, being a software developer is the best. Like, I've done it a long time. I'm good at it. And he's like, "You're bored." I'm like, "I'm not bored." But eventually, as he kind of kept showing me things, and I ran this lunch and learn program, I became more and more interested. And so eventually I became his apprentice. And to be quite frank, extremely quickly outgrew him. Turns out he was a cool dude that didn't really, I don't know, like I met more mentors and more mentors. And I learned that although pen testing is super important, it wasn't the right job for me. I'm more like that social butterfly, extroverted, wants to talk to everyone all day person, not that I'm going to sit there and focus on this intense task all day and kind of keep to myself. And so, so I started doing that and just being very excited about the security of software. Like the more I learned, the more interesting I found it. And then I started speaking at a lot of places, which is funny because I thought I was quite terrified to do public speaking. I was like, nope, seems like a terrible idea. I play music, then everyone's drunk. So they all think I'm doing a great job. I can hide behind my instruments like my drums or my guitar. No one has to see me back here. And then it turns out those skills actually go over to public speaking quite well. Like no one's even throwing anything at me. It's so much easier. and so I started speaking at various places, quite frankly, so I could just get in for free and learn. And so that's a secret, by the way, that you generally get a free ticket if you are willing to get up on the stage and speak. And so I was like, joke's on you. I just have to do tons of research and make a talk and practice 1,000 times. And then I get a free ticket. Ha ha, suckers. Right. And so as I did that more and more and more, eventually I ended up founding my own company, WeHackPurple. And I made this online learning academy. We ended up having over 9,000 students over 3.5 years, which is pretty exciting. And we had a community, which is still open right now. And people just keep joining it because I haven't fully fleshed out the entire Semgrep community yet to have them move over. So they come to our events, but there's no platform available yet. So they're all still hanging out there. I have to create a new platform for them. But yeah, there's over And it's not like a perfect overlap. It's like actually not that big, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people to take care of, which is awesome. And so lovely. Like, sounds bad, but I'm just like, this is my favorite place on the internet. Everyone's nice to me. Everyone wants to talk about AppSec. Like, we're sharing nerdy memes, talk about sci-fi books. Like, yeah, it's a good deal. And so you and I were talking before we started streaming, and last summer, Semgrep bought my company, We Hack Purple. And so for the past, I guess it's been 9 months now since I joined, we've been rebranding videos and just like moving things over so that We Hack Purple's become the Semgrep community. And so May 1st, we opened Semgrep Academy. And so now I don't have to charge any money, which is really nice because
awesome.
We Hack Purple, I had bills, right? And I had employees and I had to pay them. That's really important when you have employees.
They like to get paid.
Yeah.
They like to be able to make rent and stuff. So yeah, it's very important.
Yeah. Like across the board, employees really like it when you pay them. And so now Semgrep foots the bill, and I just get to make courses. So yeah, I actually we're going to release a course. It was supposed to be today, but it sounds so silly. We're waiting on like a little picture that someone's making for the main page of the thing, and then we're going to publish another course. But yeah, I basically just get to make courses, hold community events, speak at other communities events, and just try to build something very similar to We Hack Purple, except for I talk about their products sometimes. And so it's a pretty good deal. So at We Hack Purple, we charged for the lessons, and now I get to do them free. But the idea is that if we build enough trust with you, eventually you're like, I need a stack analysis tool. I learned everything about stack analysis from Semgrep. I should consider their tool.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a softer marketing.
Right. And you also have a podcast and a stream of your own that you do. Is that still going to carry over with Semgrep, or is that going to be sunset?
So we've sunset the We Hack Purple podcast because right before I joined, Semgrep started its own podcast, and it was kind of confusing to have two. But instead, what I have is the Semgrep community streams. And so we have multiple events per month. And so this month we had 2 full days of free AppSec training. And so we have another full day of AppSec training on June 20th. And then we usually have a guest come and speak. So we're having a customer speak later this month. And then the following month, we're having a panel with a whole bunch of people to talk about supply chain. And then in July, we're starting something called Rules with Tanya, because static analysis tools, you can write rules to look for something specific you want to find. So rather than what we and our security researchers think you should find, sometimes you're like, you know what, at our shop, we don't use this function, or this is our coding standard, or we use camel case, damn it, whatever the thing is. And so you can make a rule to search for people that aren't following the way. And then you can go to talk to them about your feelings.
Very cool. Okay.
And so we're going to do live rule writing, where you just kind of get to hang out, and you can bring a rule, or we can teach you how to write rules. And this is really embarrassing, Brian. I don't know how to write rules yet. Everyone's like, you don't know how to write rules yet? You've been there 9 months. I'm like, I was busy. I made a whole academy. Come on.
Look, I'm over here being the face. The talent can help us write the rules. I completely understand. So what's your title? Are you like community manager? Or are you head AppSec person?
Head of community and education, because we couldn't really decide if I was going to be the head of education or community. I'm like, let's just say both.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm gonna geek out a little bit here, because I have created communities, but not to near the success I think that you've had. What do you find? What do you find as a what are some do you have any hard and fast rules about creating community, or what made it so that yours, took off the way it did? Was it just, good point in time, or, you built up a nice following? I mean, obviously inclusivity is important. So, I mean, how did you, what are some hard and fast rules you have when you're building community like this?
So I actually have, so I have some, like, what is the word? Principles. I have like specific principles that I follow. And actually I was teaching them Wednesday. So actually I could open it, but basically it's part of, so in Semgrep Academy, we have these courses, and one of them is called Application Security Foundations Level 2. And there's a section on advocacy. And I try to always follow those principles. So one is accessibility. So a lot of my family members are not fully abled, and I'm dyslexic, so I'm considered disabled in Canada. And so I have a family member that's blind, I have one that's deaf, I have a bunch of them that are in wheelchairs. Some of them are very, very, very allergic to specific things. And so I grew up with accessibility being very important to me. And so I try to make everything as accessible as we can afford to make it. And so that's one principle for making everyone feel wanted, if that makes sense, and welcome. And so another one is inclusion, which is something I suspect you feel very positive and strongly about.
Oh yeah.
And so making sure that each person feels included. Another one is, this is going to sound funny, but self-service. So I try to let other people do things too. And so like with We Hack Purple, I would tell them it's mostly a democracy. So I would let them vote on a lot of things, and then just try to get feedback all the time and do things based on what we all agree is the best choice forward. So for instance, We Hack Purple community used to be closed, and it cost $7 to join. And eventually the rest of We Hack Purple was making so much money. I'm like, well, this is stupid. I don't want to charge you for this anymore.
Right.
Like I make a couple $1,000 a month, but the academy's like really taken off, and the enterprise training. So I'm just like, why make $2,500 a month from this if it's free? We could welcome so many people.
Right.
But I'm worried then jerks might join. Like when we look at Twitter, there's not every single person on Twitter is nice, it turns out. And I wanted to make sure every single person in We Hack Purple, even if they're not actually a nice person, that they would behave nicely, right? And I still wanted it to be a very safe place, especially for people that are underrepresented in tech. I really wanted a safe place for them, because as a person that's been a woman in tech almost her whole life, like I've had some not awesome situations, and I'm like, I don't want these things happening in We Hack Purple. I want this to be my favorite place, not just everyone else's favorite place, right? And so we held a vote. And then I met with a bunch of different community managers, and all of them told me to make a barrier to entry, but that just wasn't financial. So you have to like write a reason of why you want to join. And then I formed a volunteer committee. And so they review the answers, and like 99.999% of the time we let you in. But sometimes people write, I am a salesperson and I'm going to sell my product. And we're like, okay, so soliciting is not allowed. If you agree not to do that, and we're watching you, buddy. And so we've never had to throw anyone out after, like, what, we're year 5 now, or year 4 or year 5. We've never had to throw a single person out. We've had to give warnings a handful of times. And sometimes people are like, I'm sorry, you're right. Oh, I'm sorry too. I'm like, okay, we're cool now. But
that's cool.
So having a code of conduct is really important, and enforcing your code of conduct. Whenever a community doesn't enforce it, like near where I live, they do this music in the park thing, and someone touched me inappropriately as a joke, and I was really offended and upset, because people shouldn't sneak up behind you and grab you. But they thought that was fine. And so I complained, and they told me, well, we don't have a code of conduct, so her grabbing you is like, it's not our problem. And like, you know, she lives in your neighborhood and thought that was fine. So they told me to just figure it out myself. And I'm like, okay, so wow. And like, I was surprised, and I was like, and so then I kind of stopped going because it felt weird. Because the next time I saw the person, then they felt emboldened and felt the need to get up in my face. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm going to end up yelling and screaming at you at a family thing, and that's not cool. So I'm just not going to play this game. Like, you have troubles, right? But if you're not going to like protect your community, I've actually left a couple of communities because of things like that. Like, I was part of the effective altruism community in Ottawa, and all the men kept making passes at me, including the married men.
Oh,
Yeah. And they're like, don't worry, my wife says it's okay because we're open. I'm like, I say it's not okay. Please stop. And so I told the guy, I'm like, I have like 1 to 2 guys per meetup hit on me, and like I'm pretty uncomfortable. Like, I thought we were supposed to talk about charity. And he's like, well, I find confrontation really uncomfortable. So I guess you can just not come anymore.
yeah.
That would be easier for me. That was the community leader. Yeah.
I'm
right?
sorry
And so
you're
then
having a problem. Maybe you should not come to our altruism. That seems like, okay, yeah, that's completely the opposite of what altruism feels like to me. It's like, okay.
But he's like, I guess that's why there's no other women part of our group. I'm like, yep. And so,
Great.
but when you come to that person's rescue and are like, okay, like, guys, so like, we're not going to make passes at every single woman that comes to our meetup.
Right.
Like, or whatever the thing is, that person will stay with you for a really long time because you stood up for them. And I find that makes a really big difference. But yeah, I have like a bunch of different principles I try to always follow, but a code of conduct and then making sure you enforce it. So once, it sounds dumb, but when you have a code of conduct and people like click the little button to agree, people immediately behave way better.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, you didn't even do anything but write it up. And then people they're like, oh, I better. And your code of conduct should not say, don't be a jerk. Because if everyone had the same definition of being a jerk, there would be no problems. Right? But everyone has a different opinion. And someone making a pass at someone isn't necessarily bad. It's that 12 people did it. Do you know what I mean? That's why like it becomes uncomfortable when it's like literally constant. Like, I'd go to sit down and like men would like move the other man out of the way to come sit next to me. I'm like, I feel kind of like a piece of meat with sharks all around me. This is like such a weird experience. Yeah. And I like, I'm not a singles event. I don't understand what's happening. But so I like, those are some of the things I do. There's a lot of like background stuff in running a community that I think a lot of people don't see. Like, whether it be, running a contest and figuring out what the heck the prize is going to be, or connecting to people that talked to you at the event who you realize would really like each other.
Right. Yeah.
At my old
Those connections are good, making those is often helpful for, things like finding jobs or, hey, I've got this problem. Hey, this person's working on this open source project or whatever, and connecting those people. It is all about, the community and making those connections is very important.
When I was in Ottawa, I helped lead the OWASP chapter there for 5 years. And partway through, we made a rule that whenever anyone came in to the OWASP meetup, we would, like, all the volunteer team, we would take turns, but like trying to look at them. And when they came in, they would often look around to see if they knew someone, then they'd go join them. I'm like, if they don't go join someone in the first couple of minutes, we go say hi and introduce ourselves. And then we say, hey, so are you interested in meeting new people today? Or do you kind of want to hang out by yourself? And almost always they'd say, I'd like to meet new people. And so we would bring them to a group of people we knew, introduce them and start the conversation, and then go back to watching the door. So everyone who wanted to could meet new people for sure, because a lot of people would just stand there kind of nervous by themselves and not be forward enough to introduce themselves. But I'm like, you want to meet people? Come with me. And then it went from a lot of people standing separately to people walking in, smiling, hugging, shaking hands. Like, it really changed within a few months. Lots of people all knew each other every month. And it was very nice.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think when we started our Slack in 2017, one of the first things I put in was a code of conduct. I think the only difference between a lot of what you were doing was I didn't give warnings. It was like, you should be professional. This is a professional Slack. You should understand what it's like to work in a professional environment. Thankfully, we've only banned 2 people, and that was because of something completely different about, and one of them was a code of conduct violation. But the moderation helps quite a bit, and just like you said, spelling it out, what is good, what isn't, what is acceptable, what is not. And we got folks like Digital Warhead and folks that we've got on our chat here. They're longtime members of our community, and I think for me, when you're creating the community, you've got like 5 people in the room or 5 people in the Slack. It's like, okay, nobody said anything for a while. I need to say something, and I found myself when I first started doing this first couple of years, it was like, okay, I need to put things in the Slack so that we can, create opportunities for conversation or what have you. And after a while, it was like, I felt like I needed to do that. And then after a while, there was enough people in there. It was like, okay, it's self-starting, almost like a fire. It's like you're starting this fire, and it's like, you got to keep at it. You got to keep, feeding it. You got to keep feeding. And then after a while, it feeds itself, and then it becomes a wildfire. Wait, that's not good. But it's self-sustaining after a while. You'll get people who'll add content themselves, or they'll ask a question or something, and you're like, okay, because at some points I was asking I was asking questions that I knew the answer to, but I was like, hey, somebody's going to ask that question, or somebody's going to have a problem or something like that. And it does take a lot of work to build community. I'm glad that you're able to build not only 1 but 2 very successful communities now you've got the help of Semgrep to do so. So. It's good to see that happen, and I'm glad that you've had the success that you had. So congratulations on being bought up by Semgrep. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but my next question would be, why Semgrep? Is it because they came by and they gave you a compelling answer, or it was like it was like, this aligns with what we want to do with our goals, with our roadmap for the community? Or, why Semgrep?
So I went through an acquisition process with another company that will remain unnamed, and it didn't work out. And so I had announced we were acquired, and then had to announce we were not so acquired. And I bought back my small portion of the company and was like, we're independent again. I'm going to go back to doing We Hack Purple full time. And I sent a newsletter out to tell the We Hack Purplers that. And someone emailed back and said, I thought you'd sold it. Please explain. And I was like, well, I'd sold 5%, but with a promise to sell the other 95%. But then we were working together, things changed, the recession, et cetera. And like what we originally planned, the investors didn't really want that anymore. And so we decided to politely split ways rather than going down a much rockier path than we planned. And they're like, can we talk? Is it still for sale? And I was like, oh. And so I ended up having 6 companies approach me. And then it turned into a bidding war with 3 of them. And then Semgrep's offer was quite nice, but it was also that they're like, yes, you can make everything for free. We truly do value community. See, we already have a community and we've dedicated years to it. We are super passionate about education, and here's all the things we've done to prove that we really mean this. We walk the walk. And then we did a project together so we could see what it was like to work together, and we really liked that. And then my friend Clint's worked there for years, and he's like, I swear they're actually really, really nice. And then like I spent time with 2 of the 3 founders and several of the upper management to like see how we would work together. And then after like a few months, it was like, okay, well, yeah, I'm picking you. I made them wait a really long time. Like I wasn't trying to be, but I was like a little gun shy after like the first one not working, because when we talked about beforehand, everything seemed so great, and then we start working together, and there's investor pressure to do different things that we agreed to, and I was just like, it just like seeing it crumble, and like our original friendships kind of falling, like being stressed, right? Because it's like, oh, we wanted this, but now our investors say that, and it just right. So it's like they've already been doing this for years, so I know that these things are okay, and so yeah, I was just like, okay, I'm going to jump. Let's do it.
That's awesome.
Um,
That's awesome. And yeah, it's 6. That's crazy. Yeah, look, that's awesome. I mean, it's almost like job hunting or something, but they're coming to you and it's like, I haven't had anything. And then you're like, oh, you get, and then it's like, boom, you got a bunch of them and you're like, oh, I love the opportunity of choice, having the ability to go, oh yeah, I don't want to talk to you. You're fine. Yeah, no, right. It's not you, it's me. I need to be a better me from a better we, or something like that. Anyway, but that's amazing, and congratulations on the successful M&A there. So,
Thank you.
So I know that we went a bit further afield than what we were planning on talking about, but I geek out about the community stuff because I want to be a better community leader myself and to create communities, and so I'm glad you were able to take the time, and I hope that people who are also looking at building communities will get something from that as well.
Maybe
so go ahead.
Something you could do is get a mentor in community management. So I did that because when my whole acquisition thing was not going so well, one of the things was like trying to prove return on investment with the community. And I wasn't used to having to prove return on investment because, to be quite blunt, like every time I would speak at a conference, my volunteer team for We Hack Purple would be like, yeah, I have to click the approve button all day long, girl, because they could see tons of people joining. And then we would see like ding, 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 like lots of courses sell, right? And then I would go do a podcast and then we would see ding, ding, ding. So it would be very evident immediately, but they sold like a giant enterprise tool. And it's like, there's this huge long sales cycle. And so I got a mentor that did similar work for a large AppSec company. And she showed me how they do their metrics, how they do their measurement, how they track things through Salesforce and stuff like that. And when I asked her to mentor me, she's like, are you kidding? You're She Hacks Purple. What? I'm going to mentor you? And I was like, I've never had to track anything before. Everyone just kind of trusted me that it was working, right? And I want to show return on investment. And so she mentored me on that, and I mentored her on other things. And so maybe you need a mentor.
I probably do. I definitely probably need to do that. Are you still doing Mentor Mondays?
Yes, Cyber Mentoring Monday, every Monday.
Okay. Very cool. Follow She Hacks Purple on Twitter, and you'll see those links. But it's one of those things where hey, you're a mentor. I need a mentor. They make a match. So probably will do something like that in the near future here because I've got ideas and goals myself that I want to look at. So very cool. Very, very cool.
Sometimes I use it to find a mentor. Sometimes.
Oh, nice. Well, you're dog fooding your own product. I guess that's exactly how you're supposed to do things. So, yeah. So the reason that I'm having you on, other than the community stuff, other than discussing, other things, is we're talking about secure guardrails, right? And this is it's not a new concept. We've always talked about security kind of not being a speed bump and not being a wall with which to crash into, like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons, to be, kind of keep people on the straight and narrow and make sure that they're doing the secure things. So my question here to you is, what do you consider secure guardrails to be? Because there's a lot of product people, there's a lot of community type folks that are like, yeah, guardrails mean this to me. But for you, what do you consider secure guardrails to be?
Okay, so I would consider a secure guardrail to be very similar to a real guardrail on a road. So a lot of us, especially the Netflix folks, have talked about paved roads. So you want to make there be secure default. So this is the way we want you to do things from a security perspective. So we want you to use this authentication service. We want you to not use these insecure functions and instead choose these secure functions. We want you to not put tons of secrets into your code, whatever the things are. And these are the paved roads. This is what we would like you to do. This is the pattern we'd like to see. And so just like on a road, you could go off the road and there's kind of a guardrail that, I mean, like if your car just smashes into it, you'll just go off the road. You can do that, right? But generally a guardrail kind of, your car runs into it and you're like, oh no, and you go back on the paved road and it alerts you you've done the wrong thing. And so a technical safeguard that nudges you to inform you you've gone off the paved road and this is what the paved road is and where we expect you to be, and FYI, you're not on it. And so then the developer can decide, okay, you're right, this was a boo-boo. And that's usually what happens. It's like, oh, I'm not supposed to use this. And then they go back to using the thing they should, especially if the guardrail gives you information like, hey, that's a secret in your, we think this is a secret in your code, or you're using inner HTML in your JavaScript. Remember, we don't do that because cross-site scripting is a whole thing. And you're like, oh crap, I forgot, right? And you go back and you do the right thing. Sometimes though, you're like, actually, I need to do that. So as an example, I was making an insecure demo on purpose so that I could demonstrate what not to do. And so I put a connection string, including the password, in my code. And I remember Azure DevOps saying, there's a credential in your code. I'm like, no, I put it there, right? Yeah. And so I decided to go off-roading, but I was alerted that I've gone off the paved path I'm supposed to be on. And so it's sort of like, have you heard of nudge economics?
Nudge economics.
So it's the idea of nudging, like using sort of, I don't want to say social engineering, but to try to nudge people to do the right thing. So your doctors are always trying to nudge you to do the right thing, right? So you're kind of nudging them rather than forcing them, which is a thing you and I wanted to talk about too, like the idea of artificial gates or like breaking the build when you don't. Well, we'll talk about if you need to or not, but ideally you would be able to make a guardrail. Let's say you have a coding guideline and like these things are allowed, those things aren't allowed, right? We want you to do this, we don't want you to do that. So you could have guardrails, you could make a guardrail for each one. And then you could be using, let's say, a stack analysis tool that has an IDE plugin and it does a little squiggly line. And it's like, hey, remember, we don't, you've broken the coding guideline. What you're supposed to do is this, right? And so as they're coding, they're getting the red squigglies. Usually they want to fix the red squigglies, right? Then they check their code in and then maybe it scans it for secrets. And it's like, hey, this is scary. Don't check this in, right?
Right.
Then let's say they pass the check-in, everything seems pretty good. Then when you're going through the CI/CD, you're going to do more checks. Maybe you just block on really serious things like cross-site scripting, injection, whatever. Things where you're like, that scares my pants off. But if they've broken a guardrail and it's not on your top list, it's like, well, maybe we will let it go to prod and it'll alert us. And we'll talk about it with them after and be like, so you decided to do this, like, can we talk about why?
Right. Very nice. So yeah, like I guess guardrails on a highway will definitely give you feedback in terms of noise or damage to your code. Well, it breaks down when you talk about damage to code, but okay. So are guardrails that you mentioned, this red squiggly lines, are those things like, I want to say linters. I don't come from a coding background, so I don't know. Would that be a thing like a linter, or does every organization have to have their own coding standards or their own, method by which they do things? It feels like that there needs to be one standard, but obviously, I know where I work, that's never a thing. So do different teams have different coding standards, or would it be depending on like the type of code they're doing, or what?
So I would say that you would generally do this with a stack analysis tool and or a linter. But you could also, if you have a secret scanning tool, so there's free ones and paid ones. And I would definitely want to have like a guardrail basically as you check your code in, always to check for secrets. Like that's one of the first things I tell people to do, because a secret in your code is a security incident. Boom. And not having those makes your life better, or having fewer. And so I would say that usually it's a stack analysis tool. Someone I was talking to this morning and he's like, I want to use my software composition analysis tool to make guardrails. And I was like, how? He's like, I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm like, well, you tell me, buddy, because I want to know. So it's a technical safeguard. It could be whatever you want. I would say that if there's an organization, you should probably have one coding guideline or standard for the whole org, but I've never worked at a, okay, so I worked at Microsoft, that was pretty big. And you know what? I don't think they had one coding guideline, but I didn't code at Microsoft. I just made crappy demos. And so no one
They
made
weren't
me
crappy.
code.
They weren't crappy if people enjoyed them.
I made insecure demos.
Oh, okay.
And then, yeah. So I guess like to me, I was like, this is crappy code because it was insecure on purpose, mostly. Right. But then I would show people how to make it secure. So then it became uncrappy.
There you go. There you go. Very nice.
But so I feel like, so I wasn't exposed to whatever their coding guideline was, unfortunately, but I bet it was probably pretty good. But most of the places I've worked were much smaller than Microsoft, like a governmental department with maybe 200 coders or 100 coders. And it's very easy for you. Well, it's much easier to have one guideline. That said, when you buy a SAST, any SAST, it comes with rules that their security research team has written, right? That's a lot of what you're paying for, is them helping you find these bugs. And then most SaaS, like almost all of them, let you write your own rules. And so then you can create guardrails. So like a lot of places I've worked, they will have certain things that are just no-nos. Or when I worked in the government, we did not have a gigantic security budget for AppSec. And so I remember this one place, we could only afford 2 pen tests a year. But we had a lot more than 2 apps. And so what I used to do with my tiny budget is we would have 1 pen test on 1 app, and then I would take that report, and this was before I worked in AppSec, so I was like, I wonder what this stuff means. And then I'd go look at all my other apps and try to find the same bugs, and I would find a couple, and we'd fix them. Then I'd have another pen test done, and I'd try to find those. But now that I know more, with a SAST, once you figure out where the code is and what that pattern looks like, you can just run it across your entire code repo, and then you can make a guardrail out of that rule so that problem never happens again. Because quite frankly, I have discovered you have a pen test done, some of those bugs are in 10 places because that same dev has worked for you a long time and they didn't know not to do that. They clearly would not have done it 10 times if they knew it was bad. And so you make this rule across the board and then boom, you're more secure. I try to be frugal if I can, because like you can't, well, okay, I have never worked at a place where we could afford to pen test everything every time, right? Like that's a lot. And so it's like, how can we still have good security?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of organizations, they get that pen test and they don't think about a systemic issue. They think of it as a point in time, or that only affects that product or what have you. And I think it would behoove people to say, okay, we found this here. We're a fairly large organization. We have a number of different product teams, or we have teams that do X, Y, and Z. They may be using the same code across other orgs, and to your point that they you get more bang for your buck, and you're spending with a limited budget, you got to make that pen test stretch. I think I think the thing is getting buy-in from other teams. So you got to get that visibility. If you don't have that visibility, first you have to get it, and sometimes you have to sell your soul to be able to get that. So should security people be creating those tools or those rules in your SaaS tool, or is it a dev thing? Because in this whole shifting left, which I'm not a fan of the term shifting left, because that means that security is doing all the work in this case. I think shifting left. Who should be responsible for making those rules? Is it dev managers? Is it the developers themselves? Shouldn't they police themselves?
It definitely depends on where you work. So I have worked at places where devs are more interested and active participants in the security program. And then I've worked at places where the devs are like, it's the AppSec team's job. None of this is my fault. Like, you tell me what to do, hands off.
Right.
But I would say, so you don't need to just write rules all the time. Like I would say, like, you wouldn't do that every day, or so teaching all of your developers how to write rules maybe if they're really interested, but if you had a security champions program, teaching the champions to write rules might be more effective, and showing them how to share the rules. So I work at Semgrep, and you can write rules with our thing. And we have a community where, like a Slack community, where people come and they'll talk about it and basically help each other write rules. But quite frankly, if you're listening, customers, a lot of them won't share the rules they write.
Oh,
Yeah, because they're worried that then they look bad. Oh, well,
right.
this is for path traversal. And then people will think we have path traversal. I'm like, yeah, but once you've fixed it, like you've run it across your code base, you've fixed all the instances you found, share the rule, man.
Right.
Like if it's,
Right.
you're going to help everyone else. It's extremely rare that they'll actually share them. And I wish that they would share them more, because to me, if someone's sharing it, I would assume they don't have that problem anymore. Right. And if a company shares lots of them, I'm like, well, this company's probably really secure.
Right.
That's what I would interpret it as, because you're not going to write a rule, not fix any of it, and then share it. That would make very little sense. Your work's clearly not done. But yeah, a lot of them, they'll come and they'll talk about it and maybe help each other fix it, but then they don't put it in the repository so other people can reuse it. And I'm like, oh man, like we have some, but it's not as common as we thought it would be. So we have like a community set of rules that get adjusted or added to, but I kind of just thought like customers would share all the time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like very kumbaya, let's all hold hands.
I think a lot of it, I think to your point, I think it is OPSEC. Like if you walk up in there and you're like, hi, I'm Joe Bob, and I have Joe Bob at, Microsoft.com or something like that. And here's a half a dozen rules where, we found, cross-site scripting, or we found these kinds of issues. There is that kind of thing where it's like, oh, that's going to get back, to a register article or something. It's like, hey, I definitely see that, and I see that a lot with our more paranoid people in security about OPSEC. Do you have an anonymous kind of thing where you would suggest people, sign up with an @gmail.com instead of an @google.com or something like that? Do you suggest them using something non-work related for email? Maybe that would encourage them to share and maybe not use their real name potentially. I don't know.
I'm cool with that, as long if you want to share and call yourself Joe Bob, that's totally fine. Or this is my totally anonymous email @gmail.com. That would be fine. It's more about if the rule is good.
Right.
And that, the rule is good, it finds something that is bad and it does not find lots of things that are good. So not a lot of false positives ideally. But yeah, actually that's a really great idea. I feel like another creative thing that I see people doing with SaaS products, they'll write a custom rule to confirm pen test results, which I find very interesting. So I wouldn't have thought pen testers would be super interested in SAST, but apparently they are. They're like, oh, because I want to prove that it be broken.
Right. Right.
And they're like, this is the line of code, bad girl. I'm like, oh, okay. You really want to show that it's bad. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so I worked I worked for consultancy, Leviathan Security down in Seattle a bit, and a lot of our engagements did allow us access to code. And sometimes you would get code repo access, and then you would get access to the tooling. So I could see that being a thing where it was like, hey, here, part of the review is, hey, do a code review of these 15,000 lines of code for us and find, buffer overflow issues or something like that. Obviously scanners may not always find all of the vulnerabilities or business logic flaws or something like that may not necessarily be easily found. But yeah, I've definitely been on more than one engagement where we had access to the SaaS tools internally from those teams, and we would run the scans, which I found an interesting use of our paid time running their scan for them for their code. And I was like, why don't y'all run that yourself and save yourselves $10,000 where we could have, tested your application for another 3-4 days or something. But I'm not, as long as the check clears, I'll do whatever you want me to do, so it makes sense. So, Yeah, so that's interesting. Interesting quandary there. So, do you see the? I would imagine red teams might actually do something similar to that. But yeah. So I looked up because in I was prepping for the show here, and one of the blog posts you had for We Hack Purple was DevSecOps worst practices, artificial gates, and I know we're talking about some of those with the guardrails and what have you. This is from October 17th, 2023. So, pre M&A, I would imagine, but it's still very applicable, I think, in this case. So you say that there was some parts in there where you're saying, hey, security should not gate releases. It's all about moving product. And I completely agree with you. And we talked a little bit about this before I started.
No, I'm not saying they shouldn't have gates. I'm saying that they should have a policy that they're going to have gates. If they have gates, they should not break the build falsely to force there to be a gate if everyone's agreed there's not going to be gates.
I'm sorry, you are correct. You wrote the blog, so I'm not 100% correct. There are organizations that I have worked for and maybe work for now that are, want to push out and have as little security as possible. But, also from the bug bounty side, which is some of the stuff that I do right now, I see the stuff that we probably should have caught because we didn't have any kind of gates or any kind of checks or, things that would have probably been caught, that whole, hey, find it as early as possible and you'll save yourself a ton of money. Now I'm seeing it, hey, researcher found this bug, and it's like, okay, now security would have found that if you'd allowed us to do this back here. And so DevOps is great, but until you aren't doing the necessary bits that need to be done. And I argue that, DevOps is great, but nobody ever really does complete DevOps. So there's some things missing, right? So in a blended DevOps environment, because I can't imagine anybody's doing purely DevOps, we need to have some blended security in there, unless you're doing pure DevOps, and then we shouldn't have any security issues. I don't know. Is that, there's a question in there somewhere, but it's like, where do the gates, where at a minimum, if you're not doing pure DevOps, where should you think about putting gates? Is it the SaaS tools? Is it, hey, maybe you have a security review before this launches? If you're trying to put out 15, 20 builds a day, obviously you're not going to pen test everything. So it's like, okay, do we need to do it at every major release or, that kind of thing? So, thoughts there on that?
Okay, I have so many thoughts. So when doing a secure system development lifecycle, I think you should have a kickoff meeting at the beginning, and you are like, listen, there's certain requirements for this project, right? Like, and that there should, like, first of all, you should know the AppSec team, who they are and how to reach them. And it's like, we're going to expect that there's a pen test before you go to prod for the first time and for every major release, and define what that is. We're going to expect that you run whatever the SaaS tool is and the linter and the SCA and whatever. And these are our standards for the level of sensitivity of this system, because some systems are very sensitive, right? Or they're mission critical or whatever, they're quite important. And some just aren't. Like, I remember we had an internal web app that told you the schedule of the lunch and learns. Oh, if that's down for like 3 weeks, no one gives a poop. It does not matter. Right. It's like, oh, well, I guess we'll just have to email and ask when the next lunch learn is, right? It's like, if that's down. So like, what is the sensitivity, how urgent, how important, et cetera, right? And so then there's more risk. That means there's more precautions, right? And so then you design your secure system development lifecycle, and after it goes out into prod, your maintenance and monitoring and logging and all of those things that you expect. And so when you're doing the system, I would want a threat model and I would want a security architecture review. And yes, that means you're not going to be able to release 10 times a day, but this is when you're building it, right? And then if you're going to do a major release, I would want to threat model that major release. And so if you're doing these 10 builds a day, are you fixing little tiny bugs? Okay, well, I want, let's say, to have our secure coding guideline is a bunch of guardrails in our SaaS tool, and you should be following that stuff while you're in the IDE. And if you're not, when you go through the pipeline, maybe we're going to check for cross-site scripting and all the top 10-esque types of bugs, the ones that you can check with an automated tool. And we're going to block you if we see something scary. And if we don't see something scary, we're going to let you go to prod. But maybe it's going to tell us they broke 10 guardrails in this release. And maybe it's going to send an email to the security team. And it's like, that guy broke 1 on a not super sensitive app, but you broke 10 on a sensitive app. And I'd like to talk about what's up here. What's going on? It sounds weird. I start a lot of security conversations like, hey, I found this thing. Can we talk about it? And sometimes they're like, because they know they did something wrong. And sometimes they're like, oh, yeah, the SAST is broken because blah. Do you want to hear something funny, Brian? So I'm banned from Stack Overflow since last week. Because so I decided I'm going to answer all the Semgrep questions in one day, which was dumb. So I started off dumb. I should have just done 1 a day for 20 days. And one of them, the question was, how do I suppress this result in Semgrep? And I look at the code, I'm like, oh, that's cross-site scripting. So I'm like, that's cross-site scripting. Don't suppress it, fix it. Here's the 3 steps to fix it. And it got downvoted so many times. And then they're like, you didn't answer his question. You preached at him, ban hammer. And I was like, what? And now some of my other ones, I asked for more details and they're like, this isn't an answer, this is a comment. And I didn't have enough karma to make a comment. And I'm like, yeah, but it's been 3 months and no one answered him because he's not giving enough, or she or whoever is not giving enough details. So we have to ask this. And they're like, it's answers only in the answer part. Okay. You put questions in the comment part. And I'm like, okay, sorry.
Wow.
But apparently, but there's lots of people that put links apparently to libraries that they suggest you use that have malware in them, and those are getting through, but I am permanently banned.
Permanently banned, wow.
Yeah, so I have to make a new account because I had 3 of my posts downvoted because they didn't like my security answers. So tough luck for me.
That's okay. I was banned from the NetSec Reddit for about 6 years, I think, because I would post podcast episodes up there, and they said that our content made them want to play in traffic, and I was like, oh, that's nice. And I actually met the guy at a Bsides one time who started NetSec, and he's like, yeah, I'd love to help you, but the other moderators have kind of overrode and taken over the moderation. So I'll do what I can. I was like, whatever. I don't need to be in NetSec. It's fine. And I think I have been given access back, but it's more like I just work now because I know that I'm no longer a technical person. I'm just a filthy manager. So I just, I do my thing. And
I'm banned from 4 subreddits, so don't feel bad. I want a shirt that's proudly banned from the fault. And I'm banned for posting content I made about the correct topic because I was self-promoting.
Yes, the self-promoting clause. Yes. Well, Stack Overflow's loss, they'll be feeling your loss for a few days until, Tanya Janca 1 shows up on
I know, right? I have more than 1 email address, people.
There you go. So I got 5. So it's like Brian Break 1 is going to show up at some point on NetSec Reddit or something. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to be cognizant of your time. So I have one other big thing that I want to ask about, and whether it's a big bad boogeyman or not, but AI. And SAST tools and DAST tools and whatever AST tools is out there. Have you seen AI getting, I'm sure it's going to be integrated into all the things. So what does that look like? And I don't know if this is roadmap stuff. If it is, please don't tell me what Semgrep's roadmap is, but how will AI help SaaS tools or maybe developers other than using Copilot or something like that to write better code? What will an AI be using in SaaS tools? What will that look like in about 5 years?
Well, right now, Semgrep has an assistant, and it will help you triage and help you figure out how to fix things. Now, I fight with the assistant sometimes, and I'm like, that's not strict enough, because I am anal retentive. And so I like, it'll tell you, do this one thing to fix it. And I'm like, no, they also should do defense and depth. And so blah, blah, blah. So I want to make it more thorough, its advice. So it'll say like, do this and it'll fix it. I'm like, well, but you could also use the security header and, you could, validate your input, sanitize out bad characters. Then you could do output encoding. Then you use content security policy header. Then you are amazing, right? So why not give them super thorough advice? So I argue with our assistants, and the findings team told me I'm allowed to just rewrite it. So that's cool. So they're letting me add additional context, which I think is cool. But right now it'll say like, you have these things, but according to the context that we've gathered, we suggest you fix these and maybe put these in the backlog. And then you decide what you want. So that could be quite helpful, especially, I don't know if you remember way back in the day when you started in security, but I found it very difficult to decide what to fix and what not to fix at first. I was like, well, the scanner says it's a 10. So that means it's a 10. And then I realized eventually, scanners are stupid. They're not always right. Or they'll say it's a 10 and it's like, well, it would be a 10 if this was public facing and if the data inside of it had any sort of sensitivity. And if we gave a crap about this system and there weren't 4 other mitigating factors that the scanner can't see, yes, but it's actually more like a 2.5. And so having it help you with some of the context is quite nice. But so that's where we're at now. And a lot of companies have very similar features, like we're all racing to do the thing. But we started an AI task force, and I'm actually visiting San Francisco next week, so I get to hang out with them. And I immediately am like, tell me what's up. I want to know. Because I'm finding AI still like kind of stupid. Like they're like, I'll ask advice. I'll say like, give me JavaScript specific. So I wrote a bunch of talks about secure coding because I'm writing a secure coding book. And I'll ask it with every language, like write me a list of what not to do from a security perspective in language X. And every time it gives the crappiest advice, or the advice is very generic. They're like, do strong authentication. Oh, wow, that's super actionable, buddy. That's not like secure, like it's so high level, it's not actionable. They're like, don't put secrets in your code. I'm like, that's not JavaScript specific, like I asked. So I found it, I'd say 98% useless. Or I'll ask it like, give me some. So I actually asked it recently. I was like, please make me a list of articles that people have written about secure guardrails and application security so that I could read them. And all the articles were hallucinations, 100% of them.
Wow.
And I've read many articles. They're out there. There's many articles, especially by the Netflix folks. There's many articles out there and talks and other things. And it just made up a whole bunch of them, and none of them were real. So that said, there's this guy named Sharif Mansour, who is the chapter leader for OWASP London. He's one of the chapter leaders, and he is working on, so he released an OWASP trained model. So he trained it only on OWASP content, and it's, in my opinion, one of the smartest AIs. And so he's been like working on that and playing around with that. And he is very smart and very nerdy. And I'm very excited to see what he comes up with. And he's made it free for OWASP members so you could just search, how do you do this? And it just is trained on content by experts, instead of being trained on content that includes Stack Overflow, where it's like, this is how you suppress all the results from Semgrep so you can get to prod.
Nice. Do you think that they're giving you a bunch of hallucinations because there's no good content out there, or they haven't indexed anything that is, collected that knowledge, or maybe there's just a lack of good content out there for that. Maybe you're going to create some stuff that they're going to get indexed eventually. We tend to, infosec is in 2 camps. It's going to be Judgment Day, or it's going to solve all of our problems. There's no middle ground here. It's going to be we're all going to get blown up, Linda Hamilton style with Terminator, or we're going to be out of a job, that kind of thing. And if you're out of a job, then you're selling AI. If you're if you're thinking it's Judgment Day, you're not using it and you're actively being, against it. So I was just I'm trying to be somewhat in the middle. I know that it's dangerous because, obviously it's creating, a problem that doesn't exist maybe, or, what have you. But I would like to think that there is a pragmatic guardrail to AI and use in a useful way. So I would love to see something that would allow you to take all of your backlog, especially if they're vulnerabilities, lows or mediums or what have you, and go, okay, with the 50 lows and mediums that you have, I can use these 5 to get vulnerability, get critical in my system, that kind of thing. I find that we have such a backlog, especially at work. It's like, nobody's going to fix the lows and mediums because they're not worth the time and effort. But if I can say these 3 lows and this medium make Terabad, we need to fix these things, then maybe I have $1 million idea. Nobody take that. I'm trademarking this. This is, I got to patent this at some point. I got to figure this out. But I think we can't see that kind of picture where it's like, okay, if we take, we don't have time, or we need to have some kind of analysis like that.
One thing that I've seen, so a concern is that we're giving too much power to the AIs, and the AIs think for themselves. I think that's a bad idea, that we should not give them powers where they could cause damage, right? So if you believe no matter what answer they give, there's no damage, then you should give the power. So for instance, our assistant makes suggestions, but then you still decide what to fix or what not to fix, right? And then it gives you more information where you can read more, etc. But you still decide for yourself if you're going to fix it or not. But imagine it could just erase lots of the results that it thinks you just don't need to see. I don't agree with that. And so I was talking to someone, and what they do is they have their AI. So apparently Copilot does this. This is back channels. So I do not work at Microsoft. I do not know, but they're telling me, so it will come up with an answer, but then they run it through a series of checks to make sure the answer is not dangerous. And that it's not so it has like a double check on that. And so then it just does not release the answer if it believes it to be dangerous. And I think that we should be doing that with everything. So if it comes up with a decision, that decision should go through a second check of saying, like, is this okay? So Air Canada, so I'm Canadian, and Air Canada is we have 2 airlines, WestJet and Air Canada. Everything else is just flies from 1 or 2 cities, like 2 real airlines that can take you around the world. And Air Canada got a chatbot, and the chatbot just started giving advice that wasn't true. And they got into all this hot water because it gave incorrect advice. People followed it, and then, they ended up not being able to get the refund or whatever the thing was they were supposed to get. And one of them sued and won. And it's like, yes, if your chatbot on your site says the wrong thing and the person follows the advice that you gave them, then you are in trouble, or that is false advertising, or whatever the thing is. And so if they had it go through a second thing, it would be different. And I feel like a lot of companies are going to add a disclaimer saying, oh, well, that's not our responsibility or whatever. Like I suspect that they're going to add some sort of like, oh, well, that's not our problem because our chatbot said it. And it's like, well, then you better have someone answer the damn phone. Right. Because everyone makes you talk to the stupid chatbot. I'll tell the chatbot, like, this is really unhelpful and I'm very angry and it makes me want to consider your competitor's service because I can't get through to a human.
Nice. Yeah, trust but verify, I think, is what we're trying to tell people when you're talking to chatbots. But I did post a link in our show notes and also to both chat streams for that Tech Canada article or Tech HQ article about Canada having to refund customers who use the chatbot. So I don't think it'll be the last time we see that, where we're going to have people who are new to chatbot technology going, hey, it told me I could get free something, or I could get a discount or something. So yeah, I think as long as we have people who are willing to test AIs and find these hallucinations, or, you know, how many, I think I saw something on Twitter the other day, how many R's is in, you know, some kind of word, and they're like, oh no, there's one R in there. And they're like, you should iterate across this and go, oh yeah, there's actually 3 R's in that word or something like that. So, yeah, we have a ways to go. I think we'll look back in about 20 years and go, wow, chat, AI was garbage then, but it's better now. Hopefully, yeah.
I think it's going to improve a lot.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, so I use a chat bot at work a lot for specifically helping me write outlines for blogs.
Oh, nice.
And so I'll have an idea of what I want to write. And then I'll say, like, I want to write about these things. What things should I cover? And it'll make me a list, and I'll be like, half of that sucks, but I forgot these 2. And I want to add that. Nice. And then I'll go through. Whenever it writes something, I'm always like, this is so dumb. And then I like erase 98% of it and rewrite it myself. But it sounds weird. It means I never feel writer's block anymore. Oh, because nice. I get it to start writing, and then I tell it how dumb it is. And then I rewrite it. And then before I know it, I've written a few pages, and I'm like, yeah.
Very good. Yeah. I know that.
Weird,
I'm
right?
not a writer by trade. I don't know if it's the imposter syndrome thing, but, especially where I work, it's like, oh yeah, you have to write a white paper for pretty much anything or whatever. It's very much a writing culture. And I find myself wondering if I can get away with asking a generic question of something that is, an AI tool to kind of, help me out with some of my ideas, or to get over some of that imposter syndrome. Because I find myself going, yeah, this isn't good enough. This doesn't, get the point across, or, I could have said this better, but how do I say it? And then it's like, oh, okay, I could use an AI to say that. So for some of us, AI and writing is going to be huge, which, that's one reason I use it right now. I also use it for idea generation, and I do use it for some on-the-spot image generation for some RPG stuff that I do on the side. But it's great. It's a great tool, but it is a tool. It's not, it's not an end-all be-all. So definitely need more guardrails on that. So
for those who are listening, if you are submitting to conferences, don't make it whatever the chatbot spits out, because conferences can tell, and you just get a big X then. They can tell. And they're telling me like 80-90% is clearly AI generated. So it was like a landslide of submissions this year, apparently. Like a landslide at so many different conferences. And they're like, this is so obviously written by an AI. No one speaks like this, right? Like, who would write this? Yeah. And like, it needs to be your words. They can, like, you can have it help you. So sometimes I'm like, what's another way to say this? So I'm really bad for using the same word like 5 times in the same paragraph, because I'll be like, it's really important. So I'll use the word important 5 times. I'll be like, what are other words for important? Or how could I rephrase this in a better way? And they'll be like, you could say it like this. And then usually I still play with it because I really like words. But you know what I mean? Like, it can give you some ideas of different ways to phrase things or whatever, but you should not copy and paste, because you can. And same with professors. So one of my friends teaches, and he puts his assignments into ChatGPT. It puts each question, and then whoever submits what ChatGPT says, he's like, fail. ChatGPT says hi.
Yeah. So the one thing that I will say about, you said there's a landslide of talk submissions, which I think is a great thing. The problem, and I've seen this in our industry, we love cracking shells. We love, popping them shells. We love finding the vulnerabilities. The problem is we don't write well. We, being the entire industry, we don't like writing reports. Having worked at a consultancy, we actually had an automated tool even before ChatGPT that would help us with like canned or templatized responses, and then we would modify them accordingly. We also had a tech writer who would come in and go, this is hot garbage. Hey, Barbara, you'll never see this, but hi, Barbara. Worth her weight in gold. I would buy, amazing work, especially for things like executive summaries. But I think ChatGPT can help get people who might be on the fence of submitting something, which actually might be good research, but they don't have the confidence to write something good. And, if you're not a J Street, or, we suffer from the rock star mentality where it's like, oh, J Street wrote this automatic acceptance, which I love Jay. Hey, Jay. But, people will accept it based on the name. And, if they've never heard of Brian Brake, they're never going to approve me for anything like that. So I do see ChatGPT as a way for people who may be on the fence or may not feel like they have a good enough topic to help market themselves better. I can see that being a thing. But yes, you should definitely try to not make it sound like it came directly from the mouth of a robot. So, but yes, definitely submit to talk conferences. But
yes, please.
Yes, please, because we
try
need
to
your
use
voice.
but try to have it be from you, even if you're using a tool to help you.
Yep, exactly. So I know we're a bit longer than I expected, which is always great for me and our followers and our stream watchers. A couple things coming up that I know are near and dear to your heart. OWASP PNW, which Pacific Northwest, for those of you who are watching this from somewhere outside of the United States or Canada. This is in British Columbia, correct?
Vancouver on June 15th and 16th, so it's really soon.
Okay.
And I think tickets are like $64 for a regular ticket. It's under 100, and we have student tickets too. And it's an OWASP community conference. So rather than it being from the OWASP Foundation, where they charge quite a bit, but it's usually a fancier, bigger thing, this is run by all the different Pacific Northwest OWASP chapters. So there's Oregon, there's Vancouver Island, there's Vancouver, there's Seattle, and they all banded together to make this conference. Nice. And it's 2 days of AppSec for under $100. And they'll feed you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, this is a really good deal. So it's sort of like Bsides, except for it's just AppSec the whole time. And so I'm speaking, I'm giving a talk, but it's really a lesson in secure JavaScript coding. And apparently it's quite snarky. People have told me the snark is the best part. So that's fun. And there's workshops the second day. And so there's going to be a code review workshop. We're going to do a Semgrep rule writing workshop. There's how to smash things with burp. I know I'm saying the title wrong, but basically that's the summary of what you will be doing in that workshop, is smashing things with burp. And then there's another one that I think that they haven't announced yet, but so you get to pick which workshops you want to attend. You can attend two. And then there's just a day of talks. And there's 2 tracks in the days of talks. And Jason Haddix and Colleen Coolrich are the keynotes. And yeah, I'm really excited. I'm right next door on Vancouver Island. And so, yeah, I would like to invite all of you to please come, because we still have some tickets left and I want to sell out.
Yep. Let's see. Yeah, you're going to be speaking at 11:15, 30 tips for secure JavaScript. Jay Haddix will be the afternoon guest talk. And then, there's Jared Melt, Ajin, Abraham, iOS and Android AppSec with MobSF. Okay, so there's going to be some good demos, I think, using some Android tools. So if you're into mobile sec as well, that might also be something you want to look at. Dana Epp. Okay, I know some of these folks, not just because they were in the Seattle area as well. So I see some fun. There looks like there's a couple of TBD spots on the second day, so they may still be trying to fill out additional speakers there for that. So, and there's a Semgrep talk as well.
Yeah. So one of the workshops got canceled just yesterday, and so that's why that spot's empty. But they already have someone that they're trying to fill it with. But
very good.
I am excited. I think it's going to be good. It's really cheap for an AppSec conference, and it moves. So it's in Vancouver this year. It's supposed to be in Seattle next year. It's going to be in Victoria, boop, boop, the year after that. That's where I live. And I'm trying to get them to do it in coordination with the local Bsides so that I can do both at the same time, right? So I do one for 2 days and the other one for 2 days. That would be really nice.
Okay. Yeah, very good. So you went to, is Bsides Vancouver coming up, or did you just go to Bsides Vancouver?
It was last weekend, and it was great.
Okay. Really?
It was really good.
How many people showed up?
Not quite 500. So
that's not quite 500. That's still quite impressive for, Vancouver. Yeah. I'd imagine there was some people drove up from Seattle as well, but yeah, that's awesome. What kind of talks were there that you found interesting?
So obviously I liked the AppSec talks.
Given. Yeah, sure.
My friend Farshad, he gave a talk about the OWASP CI/CD top 10, which is new. And so I haven't read the document yet. And so I have like this list of Tanya, please read me, and Tanya, please watch me. And then when I have time, I'm supposed to read. And so it was actually right near the top of my read me list. So then I saw he was giving a talk. I'm like, oh, I don't have to. Farshad will just tell me. And so that was really fun. I'm trying to think of all the different talks I saw. So I saw quite a few. The opening keynote was really interesting. It was a journalist, and he wrote a book which he distributes for free about how to take data breaches and analyze the data safely and then write articles about it. And he's like, there's so much data leaking all the time and no one's looking. And I'm really worried. And it's because a lot of journalists aren't technical enough. So he wrote out literally like, use this command, do this, here's how you get this tool free. And just to be clear, not breaking licenses, but free tools that you can use to do these things. And so he made a whole book just to try to help people analyze these data breaches and see what information's in there, because he's like, the bad guys are looking. We need to be looking too. We need to be writing about these things. Journalists, like, we should be covering it. And so I found that really fascinating.
Cool. Yeah. Micah Lee, Hacks, Leaks, and Revelations, The Art of Analyzing Hacked and Leaked Data, a hands-on book that teaches journalists, researchers, and activists how to download, research, analyze, and report on data sets. So posted a link in the chat there. You can go and check that out. You can probably find it. Yeah, Micah F. Lee at .com. So yeah, there you go. Cool. And you also wrote a book. Few people heard about it, called Alice and Bob. Is another version or volume or edition of that book coming out soon?
So for the past 2 years, I've been writing. I started writing, but the past couple of months, I'm actually quite seriously writing Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding, so the follow-up. And so I have submitted 9 chapters, and I have 5 left. And every single weekend I'm writing, except for when I was at Bsides Vancouver. But I did write a little bit, but not enough that weekend. But yeah, and so I'm hoping to have it come out early next year. So it was supposed to be January, but I missed that deadline. And so it looks like it's going to be probably March, April, or May, one of those months. But I'm really excited because so the first book, I did a chapter about secure coding, and I came up with what I call the 17 commandments, where it's like, you must be this high to ride this ride. Like, you should not be on the internet if you are not doing these things. But this book's like how to build a really nice application. And I cover the top 10 programming languages, and I'm covering the top 10 programming frameworks, or actually, I think I'm just doing 9 because there's so many that really tied for number 10. Anyway, and then like what to do, what not to do. And then I'm also covering, because I cannot help myself, a secure coding or a secure system development lifecycle, but from the developer standpoint. So for instance, I cover threat modeling, and it's like, as a developer, what are my responsibilities? What is this going to be like how can I bring my best self to a threat modeling session? Whereas before I wrote it for the AppSec engineer. So this is not, it's like a sequel to the book. It's not a second edition.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite programming language, and why is it Rust? No, I'm just kidding. I
used to say my favorite programming language was Stack Overflow until like last week when they hurt my feelings.
Oh, damn you, Stack Overflow. Be better.
I think I've done the most .NET because I did a lot of .NET in the government, but Visual Studio took out the visual part. And I was like, why? I love dragging and dropping. So you can't do any of that anymore. You have to, they're like, developers just like coding buttons. I'm like, I do not like coding buttons. I hate front end. I suck at it so bad. I am meant to do back end. And I liked that I could drag and drop and it would look somewhat respectable. If I am in charge of how it looks, Brian, it's going to look bad. So So I was sad they took that out, but yeah, I think I've done the most .NET. I probably, I did a lot of C when I was younger. So,
Right.
I've done a lot of progress, actually, a surprising amount of progress.
Okay.
That's a programming language, just to be
Right.
clear, and it's very back-end character driven.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So when you do secure coding, are you going to discuss how to code more securely, or are you going to break it down by chapter? You know, these are things you can do in Rust. These are things you can do in JavaScript. These are things you can do in React. I mean, is that how you're formatting the book, or is it just like I hate using the word just, because it's not just, it's not simple. So how is the book being formatted in this case?
So the book has 3 sections, and the first section is agnostic advice that applies to every single language. And there are some code examples, but I switch language for each one. So like one's PHP, one's C#, I think, or whatever.
Okay.
To show you, so like input validation and what I mean by validation versus sanitization versus escaping, which is not the same, and why I do it in this order, and exactly what I mean when I say an approved list versus a block list, etc. And so those things apply to every single language. And so that's part 1. Then part 2 is a couple of pages about the 10 most well-known programming languages and most used. So there's a couple pages about JavaScript, and it's like, this is what you should be doing in JavaScript, and then here's functions specifically I want you to avoid, and here's why in JavaScript. And then it's like C#, and like, here's good things to do, here's things that are like best practices, and then it's like, please do not get tripped up by these things. And so I go through the 10 languages, and then I'm going to do the same with framework. So it's like, what are super cool features in this framework? What are great NuGet packages you should check out? Do you know what I mean? Like, these are the awesome things that you should be doing to help you with security. And then here are the things you should not be doing. Here's the things you should not be using. You'd be surprised, but there's lots of things that are part of frameworks that you should not use because we've surpassed past that. And but due to backwards compatibility, they don't want to remove it. And so it's like, don't use these things. Like Python 2, it's Python 3 now. Come on. Because there's still people that are like, Python 2 is better. I'm like, I don't care. It's time to move on, everyone.
Right. Yep. It's dead. You know, long live Java, Python 3. Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to that book. When it comes out, we'll definitely have to have you back on to talk about some of that, because I would love to pick your brain about, because you said what sanitization is not input validation, or they're not the same. They're not the same thing. Yeah. I'm like, I'm interested in that. So yeah, well, now I have homework, and I'm going to have to go look that up, because I'm like, oh, that's my life right now at work. I'm like, oh, we had this problem at work, as a matter of fact. And we're like, oh yeah, sanitize all the things. And they're like, oh yeah, we can do input validation. And I was like, oh, okay, now I've got 2 things we can do to mitigate risk in this case. So very, very cool. Very cool. So if people are looking to find you, you're going to be at obviously OWASP PNW in a couple of weeks. You're going to be speaking anywhere else in the near future?
I am going to be in Vegas, and I'm not sure where I'm speaking yet. I got rejected for Black Hat 8 years. Yes. But I've applied
you're cool
to
with
Diana.
That. Okay. All right. That's okay.
I mean, I'm not pleased about it, but like, I keep trying.
Right.
But I've applied at Bsides Las Vegas, at Diana Initiative, and at the AppSec Village, not to DEF CON. Okay. I'm not the badass hacker that they're looking for, which is fine. And I'm running an AppSec trivia night with the Bsides Las Vegas people. We haven't figured out what night it is, but I want it to be like fun and silly. And you know how they have karaoke and then they have this pool party, and I'm like, well, we should have like part of the night be, if not that night, a different night, but have like a trivia night. Trivia can be pretty fun. So you learn stuff, you laugh, and then also you get, I'm planning to make ridiculous prizes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm the keynote for LastCon in Texas in October. And I'm really excited. And HD Moore is the other keynote, and I've never got to meet him. And he's one of those people I've been following for a really long time. So I'm pretty pumped.
He talks really fast. He'll have about 800 slides for his 10-minute talk, and he will get through all of them in about 3 minutes and have 7 minutes for talk. So dude, I have never seen a talk where he hasn't had about 800 slides, and it's like you almost have to like turn the YouTube down to like point half, you know, F5x, so that you can hear him talk. Excellent. He's got a lot that he needs to get out there, and it's like he fills that space. And I love hearing him talk about stuff. When I lived in Austin, I seen him talk about WMI stuff, Windows. Information instrumentation and stuff, and yeah, it was. But he definitely knew what he was talking about, so it's amazing. So cool. Other than that, how would they find you online?
So if you go to shehackpurple.ca, I have all my socials there. I'm Canadian, that's why .ca, and also someone stole the .dev. Yeah, I have an impersonator. It's really weird. I am not trying to sell you online gambling.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good to know.
But if you look up She Hacks Purple, generally that is me. You can also check out Semgrep Academy. So if you go to academy.semgrep, semgrep.dev, I have lots of courses in there. We are releasing a new course this weekend. And I'm really, really excited that people get to learn. We already have 1,600 people in there, and we only opened this month. I know, I'm so excited. Wow. Yeah, I can't wait until there's 10,000. I want to share knowledge. I'm really excited about there's the API Sec University, and they told me they have 100,000 students. So I believe we can have really big numbers too. Like, I'm very impressed by the API Sec folks, because theirs is all free as well. Right. And yeah, I think sharing knowledge is cool.
Very cool. All right. Well, Tanya, thank you again so much for spending all the time. And actually, we went over our hour and a half. I do apologize for that. Thank you to all of the comments from Digital Warhead and Micah, who actually said we create our own custom Semgrep rules public because it may be helpful for someone, because it makes us look better. We were talking about the Semgrep rules. So thank you, Micah, for contributing to the community and helping things be a little more secure. So yeah, there you go. And yeah, that was it for this episode of BreakSec Education. I'm Brian Brake. Thank you to Tanya. And yeah, y'all have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves, because as we're fond of saying here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye, y'all.